as you mentioned, and thank you very much for InterDyn as well for allowing us to partner with you today. Our presentation will be protecting your assets with TAG. So the Asset Guardian is a maintenance solution built inside Microsoft Dynamics, and we're going to walk through that today. My background's a little bit myself. I'm in a manufacturing background before I started with NAV, and I've been working on NAV for the last few years before I started with the Asset Guardian and working in a maintenance solution. From a maintenance perspective, sometimes it's always about what hurts. And what hurts in a maintenance perspective is equipment breakdown, unexpected repairs, poor workforce productivity or labor issues in terms of being able to get your guys to the right place at the right time, and as well as sometimes short asset lifetime or short-tend, maybe a better way to put it, asset lifetime than you would expect it to be. So these are the sorts of things that we deal with when we're dealing with the Asset Guardian or the maintenance solution inside of Microsoft Dynamics. So with TAG, we get the cool waters and the calm waters, and we're able to boost some productivity, reduce downtime, and avoid mistakes through planning and being aware of what we need to be able to do in our day-to-day maintenance operations. So a little bit about TAG. TAG is an Asset Guardian solution. It is a maintenance solution built inside Microsoft Dynamics. And where we've positioned it in terms of price versus complexity or functionality within the product is really to get high value out of the price of what you pay for the Asset Guardian in terms of the product. In terms a little bit about VSD, VSD is the company behind TAG. Actually, TAG has been around since 2005. It was originally developed on Microsoft Dynamics and was in the Classic client until we purchased it and acquired it in 2013. Now, what we did is through 2013, 2015, 16, we've moved it to the RTC. We've added functionality, a number of things that we've added to the functionality in terms of what's existing currently in TAG, and we've also added to the roadmap, and we're working through this list now, and we have a roadmap as well to 2017. We've got continuous investment since we purchased the product, and we're moving forward at VSD with the Asset Guardian. A couple things here just about TAG again. Microsoft backed. Microsoft Dynamics, we work with all the Microsoft suite of products. We're certified for Microsoft Dynamics as well by Microsoft, and it's an industry-specific solution. So by that I mean that we work specifically in the three main industries that we're touching on here today. So energy, manufacturing, hospitality are three of the main industries we work on, and as well that we have customers within. A couple things that I should mention that are new to TAG. One is Power BI, and Power BI has gotten a lot of bandwidth recently from Microsoft. And the idea here is that we're taking the maintenance histories or the maintenance entries or history from the maintenance side and those maintenance transactions and pushing them through to be able to pick them up in Power BI. I'll show you a little bit about that at the end of the presentation today. But essentially we've created a template and we're able to push those maintenance entries through and be able to present them in Power BI with TAG. The other piece worth mentioning here as well, which I'll show you during the presentation today, is TAG Web, which is here on the left-hand side. And this is the capability on a mobile device or a PC through a web browser to be able to service requests and as well work order tasks. So the technician can be out there working on your work order tasks, completing them without actually having to be inside of NAV. It's through a web browser, on a mobile device, on a tablet, on a PC, being able to complete those entries without actually having, and create requests without actually having to go inside of NAV and have it being linked synchronously or immediately back with the system. The other piece that I won't show you today, but we do have capable of now, is geolocalization and dispatching. So the idea of being able to see where your technicians are out in the field, be able to schedule those technicians that are close and work through the dispatching, whether they're online or offline. So that's new capability that we've added to TAG as well. So from here we're going to start the demo. A couple things that I'm going to touch on. One is we'll do a little bit of a tag overview and a little bit of system navigation inside of NAV 2016. We can touch on corrective maintenance and preventative maintenance, and we'll also work through on how we deal with unpredictable events, and a little bit at the end about Power BI. So from here, we'll go into the software. What you're looking at right now, Tag Maintenance Manager. So a couple things that I want to mention actually before we really get started and go through. First piece, from a department's perspective, so this is an ERP system, and maintenance is built directly into the ERP system. So think in terms of your maintenance solution, which has your equipment, your personnel, your outside service contractors, any inventory items, any planning, any work orders, any whiteboards, and that labor, the ability to be able to balance those labor tasks for equipment and for personnel. All of that is built directly within the ERP shell within Microsoft Dynamics. Okay, so it's fully integrated back into the system. That's point number one. Point number two is Tag Maintenance Manager, what you're looking at right now. In terms of the capability or the roles that are available within the Asset Guardian. One is the Maintenance Manager, one is the Maintenance Planner, the Maintenance Technician, and as well the Requester. So when we start talking about the Maintenance Manager and the Planner, they will most often work directly within NAV, inside of the Windows client, or inside of the web client. Okay? But when we start talking about the Requester and the Technician, those roles, which are slightly varied as well, I'll just bring one of them up here. Those technician roles, they may work, as I mentioned earlier, on a mobile device. So now if I'm working inside of a mobile device or a tablet, I'm able to go and take a look at my tasks. Just got to log back in here again. I guess it timed out. Which is fine. So from any company within the system, you're able to see your tasks, able to deal with your through a web browser or on a mobile device, those blank technician tasks that we're working on, or really the list of technician tasks that are out there, any tasks that are associated back to a specific technician, or that technician may also deal with any blank or unassigned work orders, rather requests that are out there in the system, so they can pick up from a list of work orders or a list of requests, and any requests that may be specifically assigned back to that technician to deal with. So there's a number of different ways we can deal with the system here. The other one is just looking at from a perspective of, and again I have to sign back in again, is looking at it from a perspective of the technician through the web client. So in this case, what I'm looking at is I'm looking at the web client for Microsoft Dynamics NAV. And you see that that technician has much less that he's able to do within the system. He's got some of the same feedbacks. He can access some of the same things that he needs to do within the web client, but it's much reduced and much cleaner in terms of the access and the requirements that he's able to do within the system. We'll touch back on that in a few minutes. All right, so that was the technician. The other one that I'll touch on is the requester. Now, the requester may be any one person that's out there in your business, and at the end of the day, those requesters, they may have a new request that they want to be able to open up. Oops. Alright, so the requester decided to cancel out on me. But at the end of the day, what the requester is able to do is you may have requesters that are in a position where they need to put in through the web client what their requirement is to fix a piece of equipment. Now we're in a position where we can take that requester information, we can take it through electronically, push it through, pick it up within my request whiteboard, assign it back to a technician, have them pick it up and do the work, and then push it through to a work order and complete the transaction. We're now in a position today where we can work through a full cycle or full life cycle of a work order from request all the way through to finished transaction. without actually having to use a piece of paper, which is a big step. We can still use the paper, of course, but that's the position in terms of that capability. So what I wanted to touch on first here was Tag Maintenance Manager. This is the role center within NAV, but we also have a technician, a requester, and you can work inside of NAV in the Windows client, or you can work inside of NAV from the web client or from Tag Web, which is a solution that works on a mobile device. Now moving forward, a couple things that I'm going to touch on while I'm here. First is I'm going to go through to my equipment. We'll touch on and follow that equipment through to a finished transaction and show the maintenance entries that we're actually going to have on that equipment. Second, after that, we'll go through and follow a request all the way from the beginning of a request through to its through a posted transaction, and we'll follow through a manual transaction or a manual work order within that too as well. And then third, we'll work on some preventative maintenance and conditional predictive preventative maintenance as well. So let's talk about equipment. When we look at equipment within Microsoft Dynamics and within the maintenance solution, the Asset Guardian, we're really first looking at the top level equipment. So think in terms of, in my example here is a Toyota forklift, but that forklift may be made up of a number of different pieces of equipment, each of which will have its own maintenance transactional history and its own meter history as well. You want to be able to maintain that meter history and be able to maintain it specifically to, so for example, if I have an engine that is in this forklift, but then I'm going to move it into another forklift or onto the shelf in terms of inventory, now I'm in a position where I can have that maintenance transaction follow through or flow through over time. Okay? If we go take a look at that top level equipment.
Sorry, we're just getting a little feedback right now, all of a sudden. Oh, there it goes. Just went away.
Okay.
Just had to bring it up.
Great, thank you. Okay, so if we go take a look at the equipment, when you're looking at that equipment, the equipment, of course, has got all the information in terms of where that Toyota forklift is, what enterprise it's at, what facility it's at, but it's also got the information in terms of where did we purchase it, what's the serial number on it, what was our install date, what was the fixed asset number if we have that information, the warranty details, any insurance details that we may have on that piece of equipment as well. And we also have within it not only our reference information, which I'll touch on in a second, but also the meter characteristics. If I'm dealing with tracking meters on that piece of equipment, you may have hours that you're tracking. You may have production batch units. Maybe you have a production line that you're tracking equipment on. You may have weight that you're tracking. Maybe there's flow meters. Any of those individual kinds of meters we can track and set up on a piece of equipment here. Okay, I'm going to move up a little bit and we'll look at the reference on that piece of equipment. So I'm looking here still at my forklift, but really what I've got here when I'm looking at reference is I'm looking and I see from this drill down all the requests that are out there for that particular piece of equipment. So any of the requests that somebody's made from the field to say, hey, we need to fix a piece, we need to fix something on this piece of equipment. Any finished requests that have been completed, any planned work orders that may be set up to happen over the next month or the next quarter or the next year, any released work orders that are out there right now that need to be completed. So if I look at released work orders, I can see not only my list of released work orders and the actual usage, but I can drill down into my released work orders in terms of the actual tasks and who they're assigned back to as well. So by equipment, we can quickly get to that information in terms of what's going on with this piece of equipment, what's planned, and what's going to happen on that piece of equipment. From there, I'm going to, so just flowing through that idea, I'm going to go and look at the equipment statistics. And statistics is throughout the maintenance solution, just like it says in the rest of NAV. And just to orient you to the screen here, the key piece about statistics is the idea of maintenance entries. I'll make this a little bit bigger so we can see the maintenance entries here. So I've got personnel costs. So these are my personnel ledger entries, my inventory ledger entries, my outside service contractor ledger entries, the tool costs, and as well any other costs. So these are all ledger entries that are associated back to the finished work order transaction. The idea, of course, is all of those sum up to your total, and those total actuals really are coming from my finished work order transactions. Every single transaction that we complete as a finished work order gets rolled back up to that equipment card. So when I complete a finished work order, whether it's a meter entry, whether it's a task where I'm doing an oil and filter service, whether I'm changing a tire, whether I'm doing a service on a service motor or a servo motor on a production line, the scenario is that each of those tasks, they all get tracked in as a finished work order. And if you open up each of those finished work orders, you'll find that the statistics on that finished work order is in the same orientation. So my actual cost as associated back on that finished work order, so I've got a number of tasks on this finished work order, my actual cost in terms of personnel, my actual cost in terms of inventory costs, it becomes a maintenance transactional entry or historical entry that's associated back to that piece of equipment specifically. It's important because I want you to hold on to that thought when we talk about BI at the very end of the presentation today, because it's the BI piece and being able to take each of these transactional histories over time that allows you to be able to get the actual benefit out of the system, because now you know what did we do yesterday so we can improve what we did tomorrow. So that's a little bit about finished work order statistics. Just while I'm here on the finished work order, a couple things to note. First, if I look at Navigate, and Navigate is a nav functionality that's also totally capable here within the Asset Guardian. You see here where I've got my finished work order entries. These are all my maintenance entries that are specific to this finished work order, the historical entries per se. These are the actual financial entries that have crossed over either using a GL entry or a general journal entry, or using an item journal entry, or using a job journal entry. Those are the three access points that we use within the Asset Guardian, within the maintenance solution, to push financial entries over across, or item entries over across to the rest of NAV. Okay? If I move up a bit, of course you're going to see that each individual work order is coded, and so I can do some analysis after the fact. So what's my maintenance type? What's my problem code? What's my work code? What's the status of this particular work order? You can see the tasks, you can see who it was scheduled to, and as well you can see the equipment information as we go through that. Alright, let's go back to our equipment card. While I'm here on my equipment card, what I want to touch on is I'm going to touch on my date meter entries as well. Okay, date meter entries is preventative maintenance entries within the system. Okay, so if I'm going to create a preventative maintenance policy, I'm going to open one up here, and we look at that preventative maintenance policy. It looks very similar to the work order within the system as well. In fact, it is very, very similar because it's like a template. So when I create a preventative maintenance policy, really it's specific to my 360-hour monthly inspection. That's the description of what we're going to do. I have it specifically set up for a piece of equipment. It's got all the codes in terms of how we want to track this after it's completed. And I've got the lines in terms of the work that's actually going to be done. So these are the lines in terms of the work that's going to be done within the system. Note that I have different technicians I can assign. I can also assign different equipment that's associated back, both on a work order or on a preventative maintenance policy. Now the key piece to note here when I'm dealing with preventative maintenance is meter scheduling and date scheduling within the system. So when you're dealing with preventative maintenance, it allows you to be able to set it up and schedule it either by date. You see that the meter got grayed out here, and so now it's only going to schedule on the date, and I'm looking at every 4 months. And the last time we did a service was in November, and it's due as of March, so right now we're late. Okay, so if I create a preventative maintenance work order or a worksheet, it's going to suggest that yes, this needs to be done. If I look at meters, now I'm looking at meter scheduling. Our current meter is at 550 hours. Hours is coming from here. The occurrence interval is 360 hours. We haven't done one yet, so that means that it's ready to go. It's going to be suggested the next time we have a preventative maintenance when we run the worksheet. Now both, or either, both means that both the date and the meter need to hit, or either means the date or the meter needs to hit. So we have some capability to be able to schedule how we're going to have this preventative maintenance set up. You can have as many preventative maintenance as you wish set up for a particular piece of equipment. So I can have an infinite number Of course, there's probably a limit to what's functional, but at the end of the day, you can have what you want. I'm going to add this to the order worksheet, preventative maintenance order worksheet, and it's added through. And now I'm going to go through and we'll take a look at that order worksheet. Go to departments, go to maintenance, and I'm going to go to my planning, and I see my order worksheet. When I look at the order worksheet, you see I've got my date meter policy. This is the one that I had suggested there. It's got my equipment ID. It's got a company ID as well. So each individual company ID, we may want to use those common or generic names that we use on the production floor or in the field. And you see here that it's got my date frequency, my likely due date, my meter frequency, and my meter type and current meters. So it's pulling that information. That's how it would actually get suggested in the scenario. Okay, so that was the one that I pushed through manually. I'm going to actually evaluate policies and show you how that happens as well. So the first step when you evaluate policies to see what would be ready right now to do as a preventative maintenance is to create a horizon. So I'm going to pick October the 3rd, 2 or 3 weeks out. I'll evaluate only my date meter, my preventative maintenance policies. Okay, and I'm going to look at the ones that would create planned or released orders. And in this case, I'm going to filter it down just to a specific equipment group. I'm going to look at conveyors, or I could look at specific equipment IDs, or look at lines or areas, so that I can filter down to just the places that I want to be able to create preventative maintenance for. I hit OK, it goes through and it creates a number of suggestions. Now, I say suggestions, these are not required. I can actually go through and I can delete some of them if I would wish those not to occur. And if you delete some of them, what happens is they'll just come back the next time you evaluate the policies. Okay? You see here that I've got one that goes across. I've got a likely due date. This is the reason why it's come up. And the daily inspection is the actual description of what we're going to do. In order to build these preventative maintenance, so I'm going to build orders, and I'm going to create them. I have the option to create them as planned, or I can create them as released. If I create them as planned, they would go into my list, and I then go through and schedule them. If I create them as released, it means really what we're going to be doing is likely doing them in the coming week. Go through and create them, and it pushes through and creates an order within the system. So from there, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my work order list. I'm going to look at my released work order list. And when you look at the released work order list within the system, what you'll see is that each of these work orders has a status, has an order type, has a technician code that's associated, has a starting date, and it also has an order source. Now you see some of them are manual, some of them are requests, some of them are generated. In the case of the ones that we just went through and created, those generated work orders are either from a source of preventative maintenance, or they may also be from a source of predictive preventative maintenance. Well, what I mean by predictive preventative maintenance, in the case of this one, you're looking here and you see that it's coming from a date meter and it's coming from a DMP. So that was similar to what we created a minute ago. If you look at the one up here, this one is created actually from fault handling. And I'll just take a look briefly at the failure codes by equipment. What fault handling means inside of the Asset Guardian or inside of the maintenance solution is it means that we can monitor those faults that may happen on a regular basis or a semi-regular basis. And when a specific engine fault or a specific fault happens on a piece of equipment, we can log that fault either as a fault entry, or if we're working on a work order, we can add it as feedback on that work order as well. And when we push it through the system, it'll actually create a work order automatically that's associated back to this engine fault. So now we're in a position to say, okay, not only are we going to create preventative maintenance work orders to take a look at things on a regular basis by meter or by date, but if specific faults happen, we can react to those faults and either just log them, or we can also create a work order directly back for that fault. I'm going to go back to my maintenance, go back to home and the role center, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to follow a work request or a service request through the system. So I'm going to create a new service request. And in this idea, usually service requests, somebody picks up the radio, somebody calls in, somebody sends an email, somebody sends in information through a web request. And the scenario here is that we have a broken part on the equipment. And it's coming from a specific requester, which could be anybody that has access into the system. In this case, it's going to be a maintenance type of inspection, and we go through and we have a equipment ID that we're going to pick. And I go through and I actually go through and create the request. Now you notice here that I have a request number and a UDN number. So let's talk about that when we take a look at the request whiteboard. Usually what occurs on the request whiteboard, and here's my request that I had just created, and it's under the list of open requests. Now I can see all my planned requests, I can see my released requests that are in the system, I can see my finished requests, and we go back to our open requests. Now the idea here is that usually you have a supervisor or you might have a dispatcher. Somebody's taking a look at those open requests and saying, okay, in a controlled environment, I'm going to assign it back to a particular technician. And that technician, he may have some specific information or some specific work that he's going to do on that work as well. So he's going to go out there, he's going to enter in all the information on that request, similar to what we had seen a little bit earlier on. So if I go back and I open up my maintenance activities here, you remember when we were on the mobile device, we looked and we said, okay, here's the individual tasks that we're going to take a look at, and we look at the individual tasks. I may pick them up from a blanket, a list of open tasks, or I maybe have assigned my task and I go through and I enter in the information that's entered in here. As I go through and I complete my investigation time, so maybe I do a little bit of work, maybe I actually fix the work, fix the problem on the equipment. As I go through and I complete that time, now I'm in a position where I can go through and I can create a work order. Okay, so think in terms of it's gone through, we created a request, somebody's done some investigation on it, and we're going to actually create a work order. Now there's two different kinds of work orders that we may create. One is just a work order where we're completing, inspect, and repair, and we just want to record the work that's been done. Another is sometimes we have further work that we want to do. We've got production that's going on during the week, and we've completed that production, and now we're in a position where when it comes to Saturday, I want to create a new work order, and you see that I've applied a template, and that new work order, we can schedule it through to actually have the work done. It may be assigned to the same technician, or maybe it's assigned to a different technician. I go ahead and hit OK, and it goes through and it creates a work order. And it's actually also attaching some data through. If we take a look at the tracking, you see now I've got my work request, which is the original, and I've got a released work order. We can go through and we can take a look at that released work order. That released work order, the first line here, fix the problem on the equipment. So this is the issue that he'd actually done some work on already. So Javier was already there, he did some actual work on it, and here was his actual time overall. Okay, now we had assigned, but maybe I want to change as a dispatcher or as a supervisor. Maybe I want to change who's going to do some of this work. That's fine. Maybe I want to change as well the timing of when that work's going to be done. If I scroll down and look at my schedule, maybe I want to change my starting date and move it forward in time. Okay, as you complete each of those tasks within the system, we go through, we enter in some time. So maybe there's an hour here, or maybe there's an hour there. That can be entered here within the Windows client, or as well, that can be entered in the task client as well. Bringing that up again. So I can go through into my task client and I can just select the task, go through, and I can enter my time. And maybe I work 2 hours on this particular piece. And I can select as well, if I go through and find a task that has some work that needs to be, some items that need to be worked on as well, that has some usage associated. So maybe he used an air filter on that as in terms of a part. As he goes through and completes that work, I've entered in my time, I've entered in the actual requirements in terms of parts, and I've completed the work, and I can mark it finished on the work order as well. Once I go through and do that, now that information shows up here on the work order as well. So it's immediate going back and forth between the mobile client, looking at either the phone or a tablet or a PC, and pushing it back to the work order that's involved here. Okay. As the dispatcher or supervisor works with it, he can go and complete that inventory, he can review it, he can look at the pending approvals on it as well. If he wants to consume and post it through, he can complete that and push it through. Okay, so now I've got that sensor that I've actually pushed through in the system, and if I go and take a look at that sensor that I've now consumed in terms of inventory, it's actually pushed it through. We can see on our statistics that here's that sensor inventory costs, and it's actually taken it out. If we take a look at Navigate, it will actually have taken it out as well in terms of the item ledger entries and taken it out, you see by the document number and the item number, taking it out of your item availability across the in the system as well. So we have that inventory management capability that we can push through from a work order through to complete my work within the system. Okay, I'm going to back out of here, and actually we'll finish. We'll close all the lines, and we'll complete the work that's done on this particular work order, and there's no charges left to be posted. It goes through and it posts the work order. So what you see here now on the life cycle is I've got a work request. We created a released work order. Then we consume some inventory separately, because sometimes that happens. You have the inventory we want to take out on Monday, but we don't actually post the work or complete the work order till the Friday at the end of the week. So now we're in a position where I can see that full life cycle from beginning to end of that work request. And I can track back on it, and it's all associated back to that same UDN number, even though I have individual document numbers associated back to each of those documents. So that's a little bit about requests. We've talked as well a little bit about preventative maintenance. And the last piece that I want to go through and touch on is I'm going to open up my released work orders here again, and maybe I'll just open one up, is just in terms of creating from a manual work order. So if I created a manual work order, the couple things that we touched on there, one is templates, or need to touch on there. One is templates. And I can append or create from new any individual work order within the system. So I can append lines from a template and push it onto a work order, so I can make it very easy to create a work order for your supervisors or for the dispatchers or even for technicians if they're doing that role, okay? And we update to that. Or the other one is if I scroll down a little bit here and we add a new line, I can add a new line to any work order within the system. I can also, if I add a line here as well, add another new line, I can also pull in specific work that we're going to associate back from a work procedure perspective. So the idea here behind the work procedures is that work procedures in the system, they allow you to be able to pull that information through and have the smallest granule of work within the system. So at the end of it, as I go through, I'm just going to open up Nav here again. As we go through and work within a work procedure, the idea behind a work procedure is it allows you to be able to have in the system, I'm just going to go to our templates here, and we'll go to our policies and our planning, and we'll look at work procedures. What it allows you to be able to do, if I edit one of those work procedures, is have that smallest granule of work. So I can have in my system, I can have individual work steps set up on a work procedure. So if I look at Navigate and I look at my substeps list, I can have individual SOP steps set up in the system. I can also have sign-offs, or I can have tests that are occurring within the system as well. So I can have text that we're signing off on, or we can have specific values or numeric or binary values. So it allows me to be able to have tests that I'm auditing within the system and be able to have those work order cards be completed. So just that's the last piece that I wanted to touch on. And I'll go back to my maintenance manager here, and now we'll just walk through the role center and go look at the business intelligence side of it. So when we first came in here, you may have noticed that I have a list of my requests in the system. So this is active to the list that we went through earlier. I've got my backlog in terms of my released work orders, and if I open the released work orders, it's going to open up a list of those work orders that are out there currently, and as well my preventative maintenance list of work orders that are out there, and that includes the ones we created today. Okay, if you look at my overdue or my overdue work orders, essentially what we're looking at here is this is set up as past due, or work orders that are generated but are past due, so we want to get those done as soon as we possibly can. Okay, so it's just a little bit of activity feedback within the maintenance manager that also occurs on the technician and the planner. If you take a look here on the right-hand side, you see work orders by status. Now, the idea behind work orders by status in this case, if I want to look at my critical work orders, these are all the ones that are prioritized as critical within the system. Okay? If I want to look at my routine work orders, those are the ones that I'm doing on a day-to-day basis. Now, I also have the capability of filtering on all of those codes that we saw on the finished work orders and the active work orders. So if I take a look at, let's say, by problem code, okay, so what are my largest problem codes? Well, seem to have a lot of issues with the ones that are electrical at this point. So it allows me to do some analysis based on code. If I take a look by reason code or by maintenance type and update, well, I've got a lot of break fixes, and I've also got quite a few inspections. You can open up and look at that list in terms of what are the specific pieces of equipment that are involved in there. It allows you to be able to react to the active work orders that are out there right now at any one particular point in time. Now, if we look at KPIs, Key Performance Index, what we're looking at here is the ability to be able, and I'll just open the list here, it's allowing you to be able to look at any KPIs that we have that you want to set up in the system. Now, we've got a few of them that are set up representatively here. So I've got a % finished preventative maintenance work orders and % of finished work orders. And the idea here is we want to track how many of our preventative maintenance work orders have we finished versus the total overall, or how many finished work orders or released work orders have we finished versus the total overall, just to be able to track how we're doing in terms of getting things done. That's the idea behind these percentages that we set up. We also are driving some of our dynamic feedback, and our dynamic feedback below here, from the values that we've set up here within. So that's a little bit about KPIs that are directly here within the Maintenance Rule Center. The last piece that I'm going to touch on is we'll go and take a look at Power BI. Now, the idea behind Power BI is to take the information that's in your SQL database today and take a look at that Microsoft Dynamics Nav data from the maintenance solution, and look at the information and be able to pull it through to a dashboard presentation. Now, where this information comes from in terms of the dashboard is it allows me to be able to say, okay, what's those individual, if I click on one of the visualizations here, what are the individual fields that I'm actually doing some work on? So if you take a look at it, for example, by ending date, or if you take a look at it by description or by due date, it allows you to be able to change the visualization very quickly, connect those individual tables and pull through whatever fields you want to, and push it through and then do some reporting on it. And you can change those individual visualizations to change it how you want to be able to display the information within the system. What it allows you to very quickly do is to look at, okay, if I'm looking at my Edmonton facility, or I'm looking at my Chicago facility, or I'm looking at my Houston facility, and you have specific parameters that you're tracking on, I can go through, see where those details are, But then if I also want to be able to see the data without having to go inside of Nav to get to that data, you can do that. Okay, you can actually drill down and see the records that are in the background. Okay, it allows you to be able to take that information. In this case, this is the Power BI desktop. In this case, I've taken all the information, I've put it into a dashboard that then I can share with other users. And as you can see here, it's through a browser, so as you share it across to other users in your facility. Once they click on it, even in the browser, it opens up that same sort of page, and they can get the same sort of information, see records and see the data in behind. And it becomes very user-friendly in terms of getting the information that they want to be able to see in terms of what you've set up. Now, at the end of the day, this is a Microsoft product, Power BI, that we've connected through with a tag template, and currently what we're doing is we're having an update on a daily basis. So once a day it goes through and updates the tables in behind, and this allows us to be able to push through. So that's the last piece that I wanted to show. And I'm going to come back here to my presentation. In terms of what did we see today? What we saw a little bit about was the tag role center capabilities. We saw the different methodology that you can access back to the Asset Guardian. So if you want to come in from the Nav Windows client, you can. You can work through the Nav Web client, or you can also work through a mobile client called Tag Web, which allows you to have requesters or technicians working directly within the system. You can have real-time analysis of that maintenance data, so really using those key performance indicators on the role center, or using statistics, or doing analysis within the system on the pages and using filters, or even using Power BI, which is a Microsoft product that we showed here today. We're connected to every department in the company. So we can really utilize the inventory within Nav. We can do purchase orders, create purchase orders from a work order within Nav, and we can actually work through and collect those costs off of the maintenance entries and push them through to where you need to collect them. The last piece here, corrective maintenance, preventative maintenance, and as well pushing through to predictive preventative maintenance, or really conditional monitoring, conditional fault monitoring. That allows you to be able to now take that preventative maintenance to the next step. And the last piece here is obviously using requests to be able to handle all those requests that come in, deal with the important ones, and put to the side the ones that aren't so important today, but we still want to not forget about them. We want to plan them as a work order and be able to pick them up on the backside. So that's the last little bit. Michael, if you want to, the last pieces here, we can learn a little bit more from our website, the Asset Guardian. We also have a resource center on our website as well at theassetguardian.com. And with that, I will leave here. My name is Sean Drybrow, and if you have any questions, you can put them through the chat at this point, and we go from there.
Well, great. Thank you for the presentation, Sean, and giving us a dive into the TAG platform. We have had one question come in so far, and that is, can TAG be used to manage external service requests? And they had two examples, field service management for customers and to be billed.
Yeah, absolutely. There's two ways to deal with that. From an external service request, I had showed you the service requests on the TAG mobile client, and or Tag Web, and you can have that service request come in. You can make that available to your internal resources, but you can also make that available to your external resources if you wanted to have them set up to look at specific pieces of equipment. So that's one way that the request can come in into the system. In terms of dealing with it from a field service perspective, there's two ways that we deal with that. We do allow to have, I don't know if you saw, but we had enterprise set up on the equipment. So each piece of equipment can be associated back to an enterprise or a customer that equipment is associated to. The idea behind it, of course, is you want to be able to bill back some of the work that has occurred on that equipment. Now, there's two different ways that we bill back equipment. Work orders within the system. The first way is through a simple sales order, and essentially what it's doing is it's taking that work order and we create a sales order directly from the maintenance historical entries that are associated back to that work order. Now you have to have a price that's associated back to each of them. So think in terms of if I have labor, I want to associate a price back, I can do that. Or if I have inventory and I want to have a cost factor that I'm creating a price from, then we can do that as well. So that's creating a simple sales order. The secondary piece is actually through jobs as well. So we have a linkage from the Asset Guardian back to NAV jobs. And what it's allowing you to do is to use a tag work order and associate it back to a particular project line inside of a job entry inside a NAV. And what that allows you to do is take longer term projects that are associated back to a customer and associate that cost back to that job task line, and then you can put a price on it obviously within jobs.
Okay, perfect. The next one we have is, how is the software licensed? Do I need all NAV users to be tag users? Or, do they need to be all full users or all limited users?
It's a good question, and thanks for that. There's two ways to look at it. I had showed you the mobile client, the tag mobile client within the product. That is actually a limited user. So what it allows you to be able to do is any of your maintenance folks that are managers and planners, oftentimes they will work as a full user because they're working with a lot of the system. They may be working with planning of work orders and many different parts of the system. They may be doing KPIs as well. So planners and the top level maintenance managers, they may be a full user. But when you get into your requesters and technicians, what we've done with Tag Web is we're using an external connection back to the SQL database, and it allows us to be able to use a limited user. They can go in and do any tasks on a request. They can do any of their tasks in terms of work order tasks or task lines, and they can also complete work orders as they work through it. So it allows us to kind of have a happy medium between both the limited users and the full users, and it saves a bit of cost for the customer as well.
Perfect. And we have one last one in the queue right now, and that is, will tag work with NAV 5 or NAV 2009 Classic client?
Yeah, we have two ways of dealing with that. Actually, what you saw today was NAV 2016. We currently support NAV 2013, 2015, and 2016 in terms of pushing, taking the version that you saw today of tag and applying those objects back to each of those versions, 2013, 15, and 16. What we also do, however, because there's a lot of folks that are out there that are on older versions, is we also do what's called a starter or a cloud version of the Asset Guardian. In the cloud version of the Asset Guardian, what it does is it allows you to be able to do all the things that you saw here. We host it, and then we connect it back to either your older NAV database, so think in terms of Classic or NAV 5 or earlier, NAV 4 even. So that's one way, or as well, if you have a different ERP system, we can also connect through an API and through web services from the hosted solution, which is priced per month, going back from that hosted solution to push back to the other ERP. So that's kind of how we're getting around that to help those customers that are on older solutions today.
Awesome. We're getting some good questions in. We have another one, and that is tag written using the extensions way of NAV development or the traditional procedural coding way?
What you saw today is actually written in objects. So it is procedural, and we are currently working through in NAV 2016 and 2017. We're doing a changeover to the extensions as well. So we're going to be maintaining two different code sets going forward, the existing as you see here right now, and the extensions. There is some work that we're doing very closely with Microsoft to be able to take those extensions and push them farther beyond into some other Microsoft products. That's the reason behind it. So extensions are coming soon, but what you saw today was in the normal objects inside of nav.
All right, well that looks like that's all the questions that have come in so far. Okay, well if there are any later questions that do come up, you can feel free to reach out to Sean, myself, or your account executive if you'd like to learn more about anything during today's presentation. And I think that should probably wrap it up.
All right, well thank you very much, Michael, and have a great day.
Yep, behalf of everyone at InterDyn BMI and TAG, we just wanted to thank you for your attendance and have a great rest of your day, guys. Thanks.
Bye.